banks were at more risk. But this one of this report says private sector banks, and I'm sure you'll see one of your bankers there. These are not technical frauds. These are typically the larger kind of financial frauds. But if you see increasingly the number of cases that are being registered, some of the large banks, I don't want to name them, are huge identity frauds which are being actually perpetrated using their, hacking their systems. So this is becoming one scenario. And some of the, that what we have observed, you could have quite a lot of perspectives, please to add to it. Number one, primarily there is lack of awareness. When I say lack of awareness, what does it mean? Do I know user now decides what is required, what's not required? So we are actually looking at people, your end users, as the best firewall, if I can call it. Because this guy actually is there proactively looking at something happening. If he recognizes what is to be done, he can do something about it. So it is certainly awareness which can make a lot of difference, but not only awareness. Contractor vendor risk, as I spoke to you about earlier, when a data for payroll processing is sent out to a payroll processor, he has all kinds of information that is there in that file. Bank account information of every employee, complete, right? You name it, it is there. So you clearly see that somebody has not applied the mind as to what should go out. And if you see, you have an organization which is pretty fortified, and there are leaks through these outsourcing channels, when obviously these guys don't have that great, kind of capability to really service the kind of requirements of a larger organization. Or there are multiple tenancy models wherein somebody has a different requirement, somebody else has a different requirement, so they can't really help you with your requirement. That fails. Then engineering diagrams, Engineering diagrams. In various audits, we have just been able to take, sitting as very normal desktop users, engineering diagrams which are very, very sensitive as part of partner agreements between the organization with, highly sensitive IPR companies, wherein the contract clearly says, if you share it with anybody other than those who are permitted, it shall lead to breach of contract with significant, impact. And the way that this was, in fact, one case I found it pretty funny. They had all these diagrams on a standalone system. So that was the method of security. So all the diagrams were on a standalone PC. You can imagine that, right? Now, I said, what's the obvious question? How do people use it? How do they use it? Can you guess? It is not networked, mind you. Pen drives. So this guy would say, this is an authorization process. That is very funny. He'll come and say, okay, I need file ABCD. Somebody will approve. They go, copy the files, and happily go back. I said, how do you make sure that they're deleting that? They said, they are trusted employees, so we trust them. So then why do you need all this? They could have simply taken away everything, and they are very trusted anyway. Exactly, they can copy anything. So lot of problems with that. E-commerce, I can go on like this. The another big problem, digital signing and certificates. Today every e-governance agency, banking, obviously comes with digital certificates as the basic trust mechanism. And nowadays the digital certificates come with PFX files. Very simple, which are installed on your browser or somewhere, And if you really see how these PFX files get operated, you will find every employee who is supposed to be authorized their PFX files on all those systems. So you can operate whichever you want. And that's not the bad part. The bad part is the passwords are also shared. Why? Because if A is on leave, you can't obviously create one more. So you need to really go ahead with that. This was the kind of explanation one guy gave me. I said, ridiculous. So that's what happened. The more dangerous part. You know the earlier system of the token-based digital signatures? Every director of the organization has a DIN number given by the Ministry of Company Affairs. And they have to subscribe to a digital certificate. How do they get it? Well, they don't know what's happening. Somebody gives them a form, they sign it, and the token is delivered to the company secretary's department. They outsource it to somebody outside. That guy starts filing the form. Who does it? The junior most company in that outsourced agency actually is handling the digital certificate of the senior most person in that company. What is he signing on? He believes that this is the right thing to do. If there are errors, who is responsible? The top management. Does the director even know about what's happening? Don't you think this is forgery? It is forgery, isn't it? Because I am using your digital certificate. The beauty about this is we found that in 3 of the 10 organizations, the directors didn't know that something like this existed. Earlier, if you see, it had to go for the signature. And they would obviously at least ask some question. You say, somebody signing here, have they checked the figures or whatever, you know. All that is gone. So that's becoming a very serious affair. Now, digital certificates, how they are handled. E-contracts. The IT Act now tells you anything that's electronic and there is an offer and acceptance, it tantamounts to a contract. How do we have offer and acceptance now? Emails, SMS, anything, you name it, it's there. Because when you are traveling and somebody from an organization says, shall I approve this? You say yes. It has taken place. So if you really see this, how much of this is actually coming within this ambit of access management? Internet banking, we have spoken about all this. So the problem is there is no alignment which is robust and which is trustworthy between the organizational controls like the organization structure, the job responsibilities, the delegation of authorities, and their mapping to each of the access components. When I say access component, not just the access mechanism. I am talking about if you are taking, let us say, a capability to authorize a payment, it stands as one of those capabilities of the software which needs to be mapped somewhere, right? Okay. So the idea is move into a governance, risk-based IAM controls. How many ever heard about risk IT or use risk IT? No? Please do download risk IT. Of many of the ISACA documents, this is one of the finest researched documents. It is a usable document. It is risk IT, which was in the earlier 4.1 genre of the COBIT documentation. And you will find, okay, how many of you use COBIT 4.1? Okay. Now when you use COBIT 4.1, you use the risk management parts in that. What risk IT does is expands that, aligns with ISO, right? And not only that, it provides a governance based approach. You have complete templates as to how to go about doing it. So it's a kind of ready, take it and use model. All you need to do is just take that, apply it to your organization, because what it does, it provides all these requirements. It provides you with connect to the business objectives, align with the ERM, balance your cost benefit risk, whatever you talk about in some of the IT risk IT principles, it aligns that. And that is where you just need to integrate that into your system, because it decomposes the various organization level risk requirements into system level risk requirements. It enables you to do that. All you need to do is define those principles in the systems that you are currently using and simply map them. So it becomes that easy. Of course, it is a one-time tedious job, but it's worth doing. Once you create that baseline and you put in a change management in place, it will work. So this is how you see the business goals. This is a typical COBIT model, which I'm sure many of you are aware about. And this is where it helps in terms of aligning your various expectations across governance. Okay. I think you know this. COBIT 4.1. Okay. Now, what we'll do is we'll take this. So we had this problem of how do you really go about, looking at this. I'm sure many of you have seen this cartoon. This is one of the most popular cartoons, oldest. How many have seen this? Okay. This is one of the oldest cartoons. Can you guess in which year this came? What does it say? It says on internet, nobody knows you are a dog. It's a typical identity management problem, right? If Amitabh Bachchan is talking to you on chat, obviously he has better things to do, right? So, if you look at this, can you guess what year this came? Any guesses? Yeah? 80s. Oh, that's a little earlier. Well, it was 93. This came in 93. So the problem that really now highlights is, what are threats? We are looking at too many guys outside the family requiring your gaining access, disparate IT components, B2B, B2C nightmares, and fewer, keep on You got every vendor releasing a patch, and if you really see, the release note does not necessarily elaborate what are all the release issues there. So you have quite a lot of closed, kind of circuitry there. Granular access, either it is too much, which is an admin nightmare. If you give too many components of access, the admin has a whole problem to retrieve access or give access, right? So it's admin nightmare, or it is too little, which is a security nightmare. Then you have complexity of referential and contextual integrity failures. A person, like the back button, as we say, the back button philosophy. If I can go to the back button and see something which is somebody else has left over the, the keyboard or the system, that's where I'm looking at. Can I do a contextual, attack? So that's what the, the new hackers are really doing. And then, so insider threats, are they high on the, your radar? So again, I'm not going to the details of this. This presentation will be available on the thing. There is a previous version which is also there in your CD. So the idea is we are looking at complex technology integrations, weak authentication, inappropriate authentication. We are looking at fuzzy integrity. If you really see today, we are talking about identity federations. The federated identity model is really working in many organizations because you are looking at centralizing all your identity and access management issues, whichever systems they be, whichever user they be, wherever they be. Makes sense? So we remember the old thinking of the CACS and the radius models. So we are looking at models which are administered from a central location or a singular location, which can of course be federated in terms of the identity management to a lesser level. So it helps you to, you are looking at solving complex problems like duplicate accounts, role conflicts, sloppy terminations, etc., disconnected physical and virtual access. Somebody having access to a physical area, but then he has no business there to be in terms of any of the system access. So we try to map this. I'm not going into details of this. Business impact is pretty serious. You're looking at not something which is simple. I'm sure you take a hacker today, every 9 out of 10 attacks is an identity attack. He just wants to gain the identities, right? He either wants to become you or something of that sort. So that is where the whole problem again is arising. Damage to reputation and IPR, regulatory action, recurring IAM issue, high cost of IAM remediation, inappropriate access, high risk of vulnerability, insider, excider, loose controls. So these are the kind of problems we face. So how do we really go about now understanding? First, when we start looking at this, don't you think we are already evolving what all components I need to include in my audit program? Oh, see, these are the perspectives I need to include in my audit program. One of the best ways to look at it is the IT assurance guide. How many of you use that? 4.1 IT assurance guide? Okay. For auditors, it's a boon, believe me. Why? It has got ready-made checklists. You just go, you select the process, it exactly tells you what are the value and the risk drivers. It gives you exact steps, how to do a design audit, how to do an operating effectiveness audit. And you can almost simply copy it, paste it in your Excel sheet, you can draw up an Excel program, audit program. That's how simple it is. So it can help a lot. What it does is, it also helps you to determine of all those components that we discussed now, the process components and the various technical components, what is my scope of audit? Because the most sensitive thing in any audit is the scope, right? If you got the scope right, you're catered to the expectations. If you didn't get the scope right, you have a serious problem because you'll be giving an assurance which may not satisfy what the guy is looking at. So it helps in terms of the 3 goals. Please see this, the business level goals, the IT goals, and the process goals. The technical goals, you will have to rely on other technical standards. There could be vendor standards. For example, you are auditing, let us say, Cisco system. So you're looking at a vendor level standard. Okay. So how many of you saw this? We are talking about the Google code search being used, wherein credentials could be stolen from not one, many of the cloud service providers. This is scary, isn't it? This is pretty scary. So when we talk about this, what are we looking at? We are again looking at understanding the key business drivers. One, we are looking for strategic control. You are looking at the governance component. How does it really deliver to my GRC? In terms of collaborative business operation, does it address all the concerns across the various layers? The regulatory compliance requirements like my SOX, my DPA, whatever you think of, you can put it there. The operational costs, the complexities. So if you really see, the audit needs to be very clear which of these is in my scope. So one is the components in scope. The second thing is, what are the perspectives in scope? Now, so when we come here, we start really unraveling this. What all do we need to look at? If there is no policy, there is no direction, right? And how does this policy come up? Is it aligned and based upon a business risk framework? So once we start asking these questions, you can go on driving that in terms of, okay, is there a policy framework? How do you go about managing users? How do you go about managing roles and privileges? How do you go about managing authentication? How do you manage your IAM data? The very data that is supposed to be a reference point for all your access management, how do you manage that? How do you administer your federation of the authentication and authentication? How do you monitor access? And how do you provide, therefore, assurance on these various aspects? So if you are looking at using COBIT 5, there is a wonderful document there which is called the enabling processes, right? And if you want to really use them, you can understand, see, generally when you go to certain audits, you say, okay, I understand the, what is the expectation of stakeholders. I also have a reasonable understanding of what all needs to get audited. But why it is failing and why it is not consistent, why it is not continually improving, that is where COBIT 5 breaks them into addressing these components. It's nothing but what we saw here, but addresses in a very, very simplistic perspective. You need to look at these as the enabling structures for business control and business benefit. So in terms of the principal process, policies and frameworks, processes, organization structure, culture, people, skills, competence. Please see this. It addresses culture, because there are organizations, I tell you, there's a very simple case. If you go to, I don't know how many have seen this. In Japan, they introduced retina-based authentication for ATMs. It was a big failure. You know why? I'm putting my eye in a place where somebody else has already put it. I consider the hygiene issue. Makes sense? But so that is where it failed. So you need to understand this as a very critical control parameter. Of course, understand the information, the services, and the people's skills and the competencies. So going back where we started here, we are now looking at addressing the various perspectives. I'm not going to go through each of them, so already I've described this. So you look at the various components which we said here, but you start looking at them through this lens. Is it driven by a governance and policy framework? Is it addressed through an integrated technology platform? And is there continuous monitoring and assurance? Because going forward, we can't be doing any audits unless and until you have continuous auditing and monitoring in place. So who all will be interested on what kind of control objectives? Of course, the top management, the business management, the IT management, regulators, auditors. And we said those guys who are hidden, well, all of them are actually looking at you. Cyber criminals. Earlier we had this as a very simple set. Now it is growing. You know which is the most dangerous of these groups now? Yeah, one is this. This is becoming really menacing. We know that. We have read quite a lot about it. Also this group, the hacktivists. Have you heard about this group called Anonymous? They are pretty lethal, right? So we are looking at quite a lot of how they think. So why I am putting this here is, as a war room strategy, it is very important to know how they think. Otherwise, you can't even handle the problem. So it is too important to become a hacker to understand what will be their theory of really getting across systems. Okay. So I'm just running out of time. I see I have 5 minutes left. So I'm just going to drive through this because I've discussed some of the founding factors. But all I'm telling you here is, all this is available from your COBIT. So you can use it straight away. It is there, the IT assurance guide. And this is where you need to look at a customized key control assurance objectives, considering the various components and scoping them appropriately. Okay, so this is how you go about doing this. You have understanding of the clear understanding of the business and nature complexity of stakeholders. You understand every stakeholder's perspective. You map it. The mapping is done not by you necessarily. It is already supposed to be done by the risk management department of your, or the GRC department. So you take that, you adopt the same model. So both of you speak the same language. So you help them refine that model, understand the business risks and controls, the IAM architecture, this is a very, very logical conceptual point, but very important to go to the next step of understanding the organization structure and the underlying technology process, which will help you achieve your control objectives. So the governance tests are, ask these very simple questions as part of your audit. Is your IAM driven on a GRC framework? If yes, does it? The easiest way to comprehend that is you can use COBIT, because it's a very natural model. We have been using COBIT 4.1 very successfully. Let me tell you, it's not that it will tell you something that you did not know anything out of this earth. No, but it can clearly tell you not to miss out and which aspects in which areas not to miss out. So it's a very, very usable checklist. Of course, you need to customize it for you. And does your risk assessment process consider IAM risks in a structured manner? Are the control objectives addressed in terms of business outcomes, not just technical outcomes? And of course, the roles and responsibilities of who will do IAM also clearly defined. So this is something which you can again pick up from, I just modified it. It will be there in your thing, but it typically cascades right from your business goals, right into IAM governance drivers, into processes, technologies, everywhere right across. So you can pick and choose and do your audit. Of course, you have the DS 5.3, which we use quite extensively. So if you really look at it, it addresses the whether you have all the users, their activity, their systems uniquely identified, diverse authentication mechanisms, user rights, business needs are addressed in terms of the job requirement. So we are the key gap we are trying to link up here, and then cost effective, and they are done in a standardized manner. You got various technical considerations also. Once you want to also audit the technical side, either you can do it yourself or simply lay down those ground rules here, define it to the technical auditor and tell him, I would like you to cover this. But before that, you need to understand the IT universe. So you have clear mapping of the IT universe and the various components. So once you start doing that, you can clearly understand how the various components within that work. Again, I am not going to details of all this because it could be quite technical. So what is to be expected again? Some of this which we have, from our experience. One, we have to move from this technical stuff of reactive IAM to proactive IAM. Second, how many of you do part of your organization stuff, SIM analysis, help desk analysis, calls analysis, or your SIEM analysis, security events? Yes, all this is done. If you see, the way you structure the parameters for analysis matters there, because generally they come in a standard format, but you could have a specific requirement. So do look at it, and then you look at how it is being done. You will have problems with generally a decentralized authentication mechanism, and you could have standardization is generally lacking, your inadequate management policies which is not clear. So somebody takes a call, doesn't put it back into the sub policy. That's the whole problem. They do a good job, but they don't put it back in the policy. If the guy leaves, policy leaves. That's the problem. So not ERC driven. Of course, lack of monitoring is something we have found in many other nations, or there is monitoring, but they are just looking at, okay, who accessed what website, it's not supposed to be doing kind of stuff. Again, I'm not going into this, just some of our generic IDs, physical access not aligned with your logical systems. So what it will help is you can look at helping the management reduce the risks of unauthorized, inappropriate, IAM risks. Ensure that the role and control requirements are baselined and then driven on IAM. What happens is that gives you confidence. The baselining can give you enormous amount of confidence because you know what's in, what's out, right? And then look at standardized IAM approaches, proactive handling of exceptions and intensity. Intensity is very important because sometimes the exceptions become, periodic, but how periodic? What will be the frequency will be determined by what? Of the surveillance or your monitoring, your audits. You need to take the industry, isn't it? Generally, it goes by regulation only. But you need to look at the industry, you need to look at the systems that they are using and what kind of risks which can arrive from the use of those particular kind of systems. If you take securities trading, it's a completely different ball game as if you take the banking. So they have different kind of risks associated with them. So understand that, look at continuous monitoring surveillance that is being done, help them, the organization, to do that, and the most important we can achieve with the knowledge of both sides, the process, governance and knowledge on one side and the technical knowledge on the other, is to help them to put this in place. So This is just an expansion of what exactly is given in DS5. This is there for you, and this is something I just simply drawn out from your IT assurance guide. You see how helpful it is. You can simply just go through and say, okay, how do I audit IAM approach and architecture? It tells you what all to look at, right? What do I do if I want to do documentation reviews? It tells you what to do there, right? How do you go about walkthroughs? Okay, this is what you need to do in terms of walkthrough, this, that, technical reviews, etc., etc. And for operating effectiveness, again, it tells you how to go about understanding the threat perspective, the threat landscape, whether it is good, not good, how do we rely upon that. And ultimately, these are the benefits. It gives the customer the trust which is assumed. When you go to a bank, when you are opening an account with a bank, do you ever ask the question, are you a safe bank? You don't ask that question, you just take it for granted. That goes with every organization, yeah? Yeah, you'll not even go to that bank, obviously. But when you have entered, you never ask those questions. So which means these are those unwritten trust foundations, and if they start shaking, the customers leave you in swarms. And that's what has happened in many cases in the recent history of banking. So we need to be very, very clear that customers, and when it comes to security, they say no hassle security, right? Should be the least overhead. I don't want any hassles with my security, right? And let me administer my I&A. I would like to change my passwords, my PIN, whatever, you don't need to do, so I need not rely upon you. Corporate contribution is obviously in terms of balancing the trust and value, cost in terms of operational excellence, and future orientation. This is something just to share with you in terms of Gartner, what they predict as the 2020 workforce. How many of you have seen this? It's very, very bizarre, let me tell you. What they are saying is by 2020, this is the kind of workforce. One, nobody will be doing routine work. All routine work will get automated, right? Two, work swarms. People will not have offices to work for. Whenever work needs to be done, they will swarm to certain places, work, go back. Otherwise, they are work from home. Funny, isn't it? Okay. Then it says weak links. It says the links in terms of each of them. I mean, let us say all of us come together to work at a place. We may not even know each other. And we may not even relate to each other, because suddenly you will find a partner sitting there, you could be somebody else sitting there. So there is quite a lot of going to be like the 24/7 banking problem. The person who is entering the bank, the manager doesn't even know if he's a customer, right? Then working with the collective, obviously the same thing extends there. Work SketchUps, it says that even the unstructured stuff can never be defined. So whatever is definable in terms of structured work process, that will get into the application systems. Spontaneous work, it's all reactive, because all other work is structured anyway. It will be only the reactive work wherein you swarm into places, get this done, do whatever is necessary. That is where they are saying that the knowledge workers will be in greater demand. And simulation experimentation, they are saying with even basic business problems, simulation experimentation will become the way of solving, problem solving. Pattern sensitivity, you are looking for sensitivity patterns right across the work's culture and trying to predict how it will go. There will be a hyper-connected economy, obviously, which we know, and there will be this concept of my place. So when you are hiring a person, you will tell him, okay, you work for my organization, you work from your home, the swarm place is this, thank you so much. So you may never meet possibly your enterprise building, So if this is the case, imagine IAM. Pretty bizarre, right? So keep your ideas going. So the key takeaways are relook at the efficacy of traditional approaches. We know they are not working, but the simplest way is start adapting something that's easily available now. I'm telling you that will spur so much of thinking into the whole idea of how to go about doing that. We have GRC frameworks which will build in a lot of process orientation to this. When you are adopting a framework which you have built or you have consulted to build for the enterprise on security, which includes IAM, it's easy to audit based on that. More importantly, you and the management are at the same level. The technical management, the business management, you are at the same level. So that's where it helps. So continuously look at evolving this framework. Of course, the attitude has to be skepticism. You need to look at the expecting the unexpected and the most bizarre of the thinkings, because if we really look at the kind of threats that are emerging are simply ingenious. So I think I'd simply end there. Thank you so much. I don't know if I can take a question or two quickly. Any questions? Did it give any insights into? I mean, was I too fast? Was I too fast? I'm sorry.
The biggest issue here was basically, it's not the technology per se. The mapping, who should do what.
Exactly.
I mean, the whole thing is in an organization, that is where the complexity is lying. How do you really